I tried wildlife photography for the first time and learned just how hard it is, but also that it is super fun and something that I need to practice more if I want to get better at it. So whether you're a pro or you're just getting started, I'm going to share the things that I've learned and why wildlife photography can be just so fun. Back in August, my friend Jared, who is a professional wildlife photographer, walked me through everything I needed to know about capturing wildlife. We shot for over an hour and a half at sunrise, saw 8+ species of different birds, and captured 2,000+ photos, which is absolutely insane because at the end of it, I walked away with one that I'm really happy with. But we'll get to that in a bit. Now, I've captured photos of animals at the zoo or just randomly out when I wasn't expecting it, but I've never gone out intentionally with the right gear to capture wildlife. So when we were looking at the gear that I used, I had some pretty high-end gear because we were at Sony Kando, and we had access to everything. So I ended up choosing the Sony A9 Mark III, which is pretty much the best camera that you can get. It has global shutter, it shoots super fast, and I also had access to a 200 to 600 FE, so it's a Sony lens. I'm referencing my notes because I don't know all the Sony lenses off the top of my head, but it was a f5.6 to 6.3. Now, it wasn't a G Master lens. You can get super high-end lenses like one of the ones that Jared was using. He had the 600mm f4, which is the lens that you want if you're capturing wildlife. But I know not everyone has that insane type of budget, so I'm gonna walk through some of the options that I would actually consider at the end of the video. Another thing that's important is that Jared also had a teleconverter. So what that does is it effectively takes your camera lens and multiplies the focal length. So you can get usually like a 1.4 or a 2 times teleconverter, which would take a 600mm lens and turn it into like an 800-ish millimeter lens, or multiply that by 2 and you can take 600 and turn it into 1200, which is absolutely insane for zooming in and capturing all the details of animals. But cameras and lenses are just some of the things that you need. Now with AI and smartphone technology, things like apps can give you a competitive advantage and are equally as important as the camera and the lenses that you're using.
That was just a regular song sparrow. Now we know what was there.
So Jared has an app that will like get the audio from the birds going, and then it will tell you what bird it is. Does it give you like fun facts or anything like that?
Yeah, it will. I'll tell you everything about the bird that's in the area.
So like its patterns and all that.
Yeah.
Look at that. We're using technology to improve our chances here.
Damn AI.
AI?
Ruining our lives.
No, making it better.
It's not natural anymore.
So this is kind of fun. If we go into Lightroom and we open up metadata for the 2,000-ish photos that I captured, you can see all of the different focal lengths that I used the lens at, because I was using a zoom lens. And then you can see that at 600mm, nearly all of my photos, I think I shot like 2,200 photos, 1,700 photos are at the extreme of that lens, which just goes to show that 600mm is probably a lens that you're going to want to use if you're shooting wildlife. But if we go back to the beginning of my photo set, this is one of the first birds that we saw, and it's actually a really good starting point if you're a beginner. So this is a blue heron. They don't move too fast. They kind of just stay in one spot. They're big, so they make good subjects to practice on. Now, this was kind of before the sun had come up, and we were dealing with maybe not the best lighting, so we had kind of darker conditions. There was no real sunrise. It was cloudy. So sometimes overcast can be good because it means you can shoot in any direction and the lighting looks okay, but you can see I'm shooting at 10,000 ISO 1/400. So one of the common features that you'll see, one of the settings that you'll see throughout all of these photos is that I was shooting at a faster shutter speed. And because of that, and because of the lens, f6.3, I'm dealing with those higher ISO settings. Of course, a duck, a mallard. These are very common in Canada, so it wasn't as exciting to me. This also illustrates why maybe cloudy conditions aren't the best, because these birds, I believe this is an ibis, not ibis as an image stabilization that's in your camera, but it's this bird that's kind of, again, you can't see it. Even if I boost the exposure, it's all just noise and garbage, because again, what am I shooting at? I was probably shooting at, 2000 ISO, 1/1600. There's no information there. So these are not the types of photos that you want to capture. Too dark, too much in the shadow. We can't see any detail. One of the things that we learned when we were shooting these first couple of photos is that you really need to stabilize yourself with those longer super telephoto lenses. So like 600 millimeters, when you are zoomed in all the way, you can really notice any of those shakes. And if you move a little bit too much, all of a sudden you go from, having the bird or the wildlife or the animal framed inside of your camera to, you move 2 millimeters over and now you've got a photo of water and of dirt and you're completely missing the bird. But another thing to consider is other people or animals or dogs. One of the challenges is that birds are very much aware of not only you, but of other animals. And so sometimes, as cute as this couple was walking down the beach, the dog was a factor. And as we were shooting throughout this day, there were a couple instances where we'd be shooting and all of a sudden there'd be a person with a dog behind us and we'd either have to hurry up and get our shot or be very mindful that, the birds might move. But these birds are kind of fun to me because we don't have these birds in the part of Canada that I'm from. This is a whimbrel. So the ones with the shorter beaks that are a little bit smaller, whimbrels, long-billed curlew. So you might see them kind of get mixed up together. Or maybe I'm mixing them up. Oh gosh, am I mixing them up? But because these animals have the long bills, they would actually go into the sand, and I believe they'd be pulling up little crawfish or little sea creatures. They're having their breakfast. There's the big bird. There's the small bird. But you can see with the ISO setting and the shutter speed that I'm using, I'm shooting super fast, 1/1000. So these are probably a little bit dark. If I want to bump the exposure, that's probably where I'd want to see this photo sit. Without much adjustments, without much editing, I probably could just throw on one of my presets here and just get an initial look for some of these photos. Thunderbird isn't bad. That's one that I'll typically use all the time. Maybe I want to crop in just a little bit. Oh, there's before, there's after. But you can see with the burst shutter on the Sony A9 Mark III that I'm basically just firing these off, hoping to catch the exact perfect moment when maybe this bird is doing something. Again, I don't know what I'm doing. I just see a kind of cool looking bird against the crashing waves and think, okay, why not? The thing you want to be aware of is that every bird, every wildlife has a safe distance where as soon as you kind of get within that bubble, it will start moving away from you. Now, because we were on the beach, we knew that the birds would basically go up and down the beach. So we had that advantage of kind of being able to predict where it would go. What a distinguished gentleman. These ones are kind of fun because you have the bird sitting in this area. You got a nice little reflection. If I was to edit this one up really quick, you might look at that and go, that is a great photo, but it doesn't really tell a story. The thing that I'm looking for when we have multiple birds in frame is maybe for some sort of interaction or something like this where you can see, let's zoom in even more. There we go. It snapped up its breakfast. But if we take a quick look at the settings, again, 1/1000 because I want to freeze that motion. ISO 2500 because I'm at f6.3. I'm at that maximum focal length range of 600. So I'm zoomed in all the way. Let me just edit this one really quick. So here's the photo with my basic adjustments. And again, if I just want to try some of these presets, you know, some are a little bit more stylized than others. Actually, South Shore is one that tends to be for tropical locations, pulls a little bit more saturation and a little bit of those blues. So I think in this case, if I go to the unedited, there's before, there's after. Not too much editing, but you'll see one later on in this video that I did do a little bit more editing to really make the photo pop. I was holding my breath. Oh boy.
Something, you know?
You don't like the look of the seaweed?
Not really. This one just looks like a bunch of guts. I was just watching Alien, you know?
Yeah.
And it's kind of...
That's it right there.
Yeah. Mr. Krabby.
He's hiding.
He's trying to fight me, look.
Is he?
Yeah, look, he has his arms. He has like his little claws out. Oh, he's just pretending that he's not there.
He's pretending he's not there. There's kind of a sad story for these birds here. So these are cormorants, and you can see that they're all kind of like up high. They're these really dark black colored birds. You know, there's a few of them swimming down below, and so, you know, kind of a fun photo to see them all standing on these piers. But one of the cormorants made its way to the beach, or at least that's what we thought, because we're like, oh, that's kind of weird that there's one just kind of like chilling by himself. Now, these photos are a little bit more challenging to edit, but if we do a little bit of a bump in the shadows, you can really see, you know, there's some detail there. It's noisy because we're at 2500 ISO, but you know, if I apply a preset here, I don't know, South Shore looks really good for wildlife photography. If you haven't checked out my Lightroom presets, you can find the link down in the description below. They actually come with tutorials. I think there's like 32 presets in total. But my presets are what I use to edit all the photos that you see over on Instagram. So if you ever want to check them out, links are down in the description. But every time we got close to this cormorant, he wouldn't fly away. And we thought, well, that's a little bit funny. Then he got into the ocean and he started swimming away. And that's when we realized, oh, this bird is actually injured. That's why he's away from everyone else, because he's kind of like this outcast that everyone has rejected. And this is kind of the sad story of this lonely cormorant kind of just swimming away because, you know, we approached and he said, hey guys, that's close enough. See you later. I'm out. But one of the things you want to be thinking about is the story that you're telling with the bird photos, with the wildlife photography that you're capturing. You know, in this case, here's a flock of the long-billed curlews. But the nice thing about getting a group of them is you kind of see, oh, like this is like their bird family that they're going and having their breakfast with. Oh, look at that. That's kind of sad. And then there's that cormorant who can't fly, just in between the rest of these birds. But the thing you want to do is always research the birds that you're interested in or the wildlife that you're interested in advance so that you know its behavior. In this case, you know, I kind of got excited and saw that the blue heron had flown away from its starting location where we saw it at. These photos, I was not ready to capture it, and the lighting is not the greatest. Did I even get... Yeah, see, you don't really want the bird from behind. You want the bird coming at you. You want maybe a little bit more of a contrast light condition so you can get maybe some of the glow from the feathers. These aren't the greatest photos, but you know, I did get them. I'll probably go back and end up deleting most of these because I don't need to store them on my hard drive. This next set of photos from these long-billed curlews, just kind of like taking off from the shoreline, you know, maybe grabbing their breakfast and flying down the beach is where I learned my biggest lesson. You can see here I'm doing burst shots on the Sony A9 III. I'm not doing the fastest setting. I'm kind of doing like the one setting below that. But a lot of these photos, I wasn't ready for them to fly, and I was, you know, zoomed into 600, and 600 millimeters makes it a little bit challenging to frame your subject. Yeah, you can see this guy. This guy's taking off. He's like, you guys are too close. Some of these aren't bad, but they're not really standout photos because the birds aren't doing anything. You know, you introduce a second bird and it kind of creates this story of maybe like the two birds are talking. Like you can create a little narrative in your head, like, you know, Jerry here interrupted Sam, and Sam is like, yo, Jerry, get out of my photo here. Anthony's trying to, like, you know, take a new photo for my Instagram. Okay, so here's the one that I want to show you. I saw this bird kind of like doing his little run, and you can see it's not quite framed because tracking birds while the shutter's going off can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. But in just a second here, you'll see better. He's taken off. And right here is the one that I am super proud of. So the bird is nice and sharp and in focus. 3200 ISO, not a problem. 600 millimeters, zoomed in all the way, which makes it a little bit challenging if you're trying to track, but 1/2000, just fast enough to capture the movement of the wings without too much blurriness. There is maybe like a little bit of blurriness between me panning and tracking and the bird moving, but this is the one that if I was to share, I'd be super proud to share. Now, it might be a little bit tight on the crop, but it's not anything you can't, Photoshop, expand it out a little bit, or generative AI and just expand the background. Now, I will show you the before. This is what it looks like. Some of the seaweed was getting too close for comfort, so I ended up taking it out. But one of the tricks with wildlife photography is doing selective edits. So instead of sharpening the entire photo or doing noise reduction on the entire photo, because again, 3200 ISO, there might be a little bit noise, but if I zoom in, you can see that the background has no noise. The bird does have a little bit of noise, but it's not anything that's a deal breaker. So here, for my background selection, you can see that my noise reduction is basically cranked all of the way. And you might want to moderate that depending on your photo, but in my case, because the background was plain and simple and basically this really smooth gradient, it worked for me. Another tip is enhancing the eye of the bird. Like humans and other animals, they do have a pupil, but because it is dark and super black and hard to see, you don't really get that detail. So I did go in and apply some localized masks just to make that stand out.
This is kind of like catching Pokemon. Jared keeps telling us which birds are rare and then how to capture it in a specific way. I feel like I'm Pokemon Snap or something.
This bird is a pelagic bird, which means that it stays in the ocean for most of the year. So seeing this bird is not common.
But I see what you mean with half pressing the whole time.
Whole time. There it is.
Oh, it's so nice. Did I scare you?
No. So normally, if I needed this shot now, I'd be going to the other side. I'd be hiding on the corner, knowing that it comes there,
Yeah.
and then hoping no dog comes to the beach.
Yeah.
Because if a dog came here, it would go right to where the bridge is. If I do that, I know I only get one chance.
And then he's gone. He's never
Then
going
they're
back
never
to that
coming
spot.
back. So that would be if I needed the shot and I didn't have my teleconverter. But if I had the 2 times here, I could get it.
I already have the feather
it's really
detail.
nice and sharp, yeah.
Jared was super helpful in giving us all the tips that we needed to make sure we got the shot. One of the ones that you may have heard him mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, was being in that state of half pressing your camera shutter so that the autofocus is engaged and ready to fire, so that when you do fully release the camera shutter, it is already tracking your subject. So if your camera has an AI autofocus or a servo autofocus, that's that drive mode where it's constantly focusing, make sure you've set it to that. And of course, if you have animal autofocus, make sure it's set to that as well. But when we were sitting at this pond, even with Jared's 600 millimeter lens and the 1.4 teleconverter, some of the photos just weren't enough. So my photos at 500 millimeters here, where I'm taking images of these ducks, aren't really framed the way that I would want. I would want to be in probably 1.5, 2 times more. And you can see again, 12,800 ISO, f6.3 because that's the limitation of this lens that I'm shooting on, and 1/2000. Now, ducks probably aren't gonna move super fast when they're just sitting there, so I probably could have lowered that. But just to show you what I mean, if you apply localized noise reduction, you can go from something like this to something like this. You can see it does a significant job at reducing all of that noise detail in the background where you don't want to see it. Again, there's before, There's after. We haven't really damaged any part of this duck here. Mind you, we might want to clean up some of those edges, and I've probably applied it a little bit more heavier than I would, but you know, don't overuse noise reduction on your animal because you'll obliterate all of that feather detail and all of that sharpness that you really want to see. So this bird here, which I believe is a warbler, had one of the largest safe distances of all the birds that we photographed. He looks so cute, but we could not get close to him. And I think this is basically the closest I could get. In fact, I got so fed up with trying to get a photo of him that there was a mallard sitting on this log that I thought looked really nice. And I think I actually edited one of these photos. There we go. You know, it looks like he's yelling at me. It looks like he's honking at me. I took so many photos of this warbler. I was like seriously because Jared said it was like a little bit more of a rare bird. So as soon as I hear something is rare, the like Pokemon, I gotta catch them all instinct kicks in. But I did not catch this bird, nor did I catch this bird. As we were leaving the beach, we saw, or Jared saw, a hummingbird. And this is how good my camera skills are. And this is why I said at the beginning I need to practice. You know, the hummingbird with the Sony A9 III, obviously no rolling shutter because of the global shutter that this camera has. But I think at this point I kind of just gave up. You know, there's a photo of a hummingbird, not the best lighting, not the best 12,800 ISO setting. Probably could have zoomed in a little bit more. Now, I would absolutely love to own a super telephoto lens because unfortunately I no longer have access to the Sony A9 III and the 200-600 or that awesome 600mm lens that Jared was using. I don't think I'd ever be able to afford one of those lenses because they are $10,000 plus, but something like the Canon 100-400 isn't bad. Maybe it could be a little bit more telephoto. Something like the 200-800 that Canon makes is also an option. Or if I had to buy one, I'd probably go with the Canon RF 100-500, which is an L series lens and is actually a lens that I've used in the past. So if you want to see that video, you can check it out right here. And until the next one, grab your camera, get out, and go shoot photos.